did not pay her to say that, I promise. Say like, okay, no, like stop. I hear you, stakeholder, that's important to you, and you feel like it's gonna do X, but the data says it is not. Like, are we real life superheroes?
Oh my God, I'm getting like PTSD from this question. It's been a while. Anything that you're saying yes to, you're saying no to something else. And this is a really good way of being able to put a method to the madness of like, my recommendation is always just to try different things and see what gels. This worked for me and again, and so I kind of keep going back to it and tweaking it a little bit. But for me, the method is...
All right, listeners, welcome back to another episode of Method and Madness, the product. And we are joined again with Steph, is really helping us round out season 3 as a mini series. So appreciate having her back. So today we're going to be talking about prioritizing and making tough decisions as a product manager. So essentially, learn how to prioritize product features and make tough decisions. Sounds easy enough, right? So in today's fast-paced business environment, companies must constantly innovate to stay ahead of the competition. One of the most critical aspects of product development is determining which features to prioritize and which to postpone and or which ones just to eliminate altogether. This process requires careful consideration as making the wrong decision can result in wasted resources and a big loss of revenue. So in this episode, we're going to discuss some of the strategies for prioritizing product features and making tough decisions. And I'm going to pass it to you, Steph. Why don't you tell us about how you've kind of addressed like prioritizing things and when you've had to make some tough decisions on features or even sometimes resources as it impacts the team because maybe you didn't have the right skills for that team.
Yeah, I love this topic. I think I've taught some classes on it. It's the single most important thing that we as product managers need to do. And so we've kind of had to go back to basics, and I'm going to talk through like the methodology that works for me 100% of the time, just to think through like I've got, whether it be I've got a bunch of little features of a product and what do I build next? Or in the case of this week, like we've got big strategic decisions that take our company in a different way and make or break us. Like, how do we get value sooner? How do we prove out our product? How do we, attract different investors, whatever it might be? So yeah, the topic is definitely right at the forefront of my brain. But the thing I think that always works for me, and I will also preface it by saying there are 1,000 different methodologies, and what works for me, what works for Manny, like my recommendation is always just to try different things and see what gels. This worked for me time and time again, and so I kind of keep going back to it and tweaking it a little bit. But for me, the method is impact versus effort. Super simple. Essentially, what I'll do is I'll look at like, again, just say it's a number of features and I'm trying to figure out what to build next and how to kind of structure my roadmap. I look at like the impact to users, the impact to the business. What are the overall objectives of the business? How do I align that with the needs of the users? And then how do I try and quantify in numbers, but then also like leverage any qualitative data and be able to gauge impact. I'll do then get like 10 features and literally stack rank them. No two are the same. You have to make decisions. It's part of being a product manager. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And those are essentially become coordinates, right? And so as I said, impact versus effort, the next axis is going to be effort. And this needs to be thought of in a very comprehensive way. It's not just like the effort of this feature will take me 2 weeks to put out there, because that's not, unless you're building a product in a complete vacuum, which is not real life, there's going to be operational changes, there might be process changes, there might be other product changes, training changes. Like I don't think I've ever put out anything that didn't have to, go through some other group in the company's alignment and think through like, how is this going to change you? And so you have to really think about that in an effort way. It's not a measure of days. It's not a measure of, whatever. It's just, relatively speaking, again, you stack rank them. You have feature one. Is that going to be more or less effort? And you literally do that, put them all in a line. And then for me, I graph it. And you've got like the stack rank of impact, the stack rank of effort, and you plot them on a graph. And then you look at like, okay, essentially what's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck? Highest impact, less effort. And that's where you want to spend your time. And this is an exercise that you don't do once and move on from, and that's your roadmap for forever. I literally do this, like, I probably subconsciously do this exercise every single day just for my own, like, how am I gonna organize my day today? How am I gonna organize my week? To bigger things like, how am I gonna organize my roadmap, to like, how are we gonna save the company today? It's just like, it's very simple. It's very useful. It kind of helps you think about, opportunity costs, like anything that you're saying yes to, you're saying no to something else. And this is a really good way of being able to put a method to the madness of like, let's actually get some order in here, and give myself a little bit more, confidence in my decision making, I guess.
We did not pay her to say that, I promise.
You should.
But no, I definitely agree with everything you said there. And it's funny because that was the first strategy that I had here listed down: value versus effort analysis, which you describe perfectly. And then there's also too like a component of it, or like, some folks, like, depending on the product, they may start off first with user feedback, customer feedback as a critical tool for prioritizing, then roll that into the value and the effort analysis. So I think there's going to be times, depending on the industry and product, where you're going to have to Frankenstein some of these together for the situation. And then you also have like your business goals. What have you as a business committed to? So that's another strategy that some use. And then final, I would probably say like data analysis. It's a little bit, goes hand in hand with the effort versus impact, because if you can validate that effort and impact with tangible data, you're able to analyze that for usage patterns, potential, if you're in the retail space, purchasing behavior or feedback. If you're in a space where it's, primarily, for healthcare, if you just need to see the usage of the new feature or the product, because maybe all the doctors should be moving towards that. But if you have a low adoption metric, then it's like, okay, did I really solve the problem? So I think depending on the space, depending on what industry you're in, you may even Frankenstein some of these different strategies together. But I definitely love the value and the effort. And that's why that was my number one as well. So I think regardless, I think that is probably the number one tool. And then you take some of those other strategies and you pile on top of it to either prove or disprove what your value and effort hypothesis is. Would you agree with that, Steph?
Yeah, totally. And I think just to add on to that, like, for most of the cases in which you're prioritizing, like, obviously this isn't applicable if I'm talking about my own day, but if I'm talking about a product, like, I love doing this with other people. I think it's a really dangerous place to do it by yourself. And so typically I'll like pull together all the people whose areas might be impacted. I mean, you got to like cap it at a certain point, because there's certainly organizations that are very consensus driven where it's like 100 people are going to prioritize. That doesn't work. Like maybe 5 people. But I think that like there's something kind of magical when you go through this workshop and come out and everybody's just naturally align to the priorities. I think there's a really important thing, in the absence of really hard quantitative data, if you have or have not gotten user data, people across the company see things in different way. They think about things in different way.
Absolutely.
They have different expertise and will pick up on different nuances. And like, it's such a big piece of being a product manager is being able to solicit and understand and talk to lots and lots of different people. And so like leverage those skills for good, leverage those skills to frankly help you and unburden some of the work. And as I said, like you end up coming out of this workshop with alignment of maybe the 5 key people who are decision makers, and that just saves you having to explain rationale down the line.
So as you talk about that, I'm just thinking like, are we real life superheroes?
Yeah.
I'll take
Next
it.
episode, wear a cape.
Well, I mean, I guess I could be Green Lantern right now. I think that all makes sense for like the strategy on prioritizing. So once you prioritize, now it's like let's just dive in a little bit on like these tough product decisions. Like, I have a couple things here down here jotted in my notes, like cost benefit analysis, risk analysis, opportunity cost analysis, team input, stakeholder input. So now that you have that prioritized, and or as you're prioritizing, because maybe some of it you need to understand like more of those analysis data points. How do you use that to help you make like the tough decisions to say like, okay, no, like stop. I hear you, stakeholder, that's important to you and you feel like it's going to do X, but the data says it is not.
Oh my God, I'm getting like PTSD from this question. It's been a while since I had one of those. Well, for starters, I think the question is not about like, how do I make tough decisions? It's like, how do I make tough recommendations, right? We've said it
Yes.
over and over again, is it so rare to be a decision maker? And so I always think about like, my order of operations here is always understand who's going to be an advocate or a blocker and involve both of those parties, both of those groups. Do this workshop, try and get really early alignment and get champions. I think what I have found is that people want to feel heard rather than
Mm-hmm.
want to be right, right? So like
Mm.
more often than not, if you can pull people together and talk about like, what do you think? Oh, I feel a little bit differently about this and this is why, and it's tied to data. And like, usually I will come to these things having done a whole bunch of homework. But I think just through talking through it, like my perspective will probably shift, certainly, and their perspective will hopefully shift as well. And we'll figure out a way to kind of meet in the middle. And then it's less about like, I'm right, this was my idea, you're wrong. It's like we came together and we solved a problem. We first aligned on the problem because that's often a challenge. And then we aligned on the right kind of path forward. And I think, you got to figure out who's the ultimate decision maker. Sometimes for little things, it might be you, but you probably won't have gone through all of this. For big feature
Right.
recommendations, big changes to the product, you're certainly going to be talking to your boss, if not their boss, if not their boss, and so forth. So I think the more that you can get champions on your side, so one piece of it is a lot about alignment. I think another thing is just about like explaining the why. I mean, it hasn't come up in our discussions yet, but it's such a tenet of our job, right? Is like, it's not the what, it's not the solution, but it's why. Why are we here? What are we solving? Why is that important? And I think being able to explain the metrics, the rationale behind it all, is super important. And it takes away that like, I feel like we should build a chatbot next, to like, no, I know that this is a problem and we are not building a chatbot. We are building, some other feature. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think the last thing I'll say, there was someone who I had worked with who always used to say, stories sell hearts and data sells minds. which I agree to an extent. I think for me, it's always been about like, know your audience. I mean, we're supposed to
Yes.
be really good at reading people and users and all of that. Do the same to internal stakeholders, coworkers, team members. And like, when I think about my communication, there's this gradient between super numbers heavy and super emotional stories heavy. And where I fall is somewhere in between. And that's usually going to be based on like, I'm talking to Manny. He probably wants me to talk about stories and we joke and we have fun and then, pepper in the metrics so he feels good about this. And some other people are like, do not bother me with that emotional crap, like numbers or bust. And so I think it's just knowing your audience and being able to leverage that to explain your why, to be able to build trust in your recommendations, and then, make the tough decisions from there.
And I would probably say one of my most powerful tools. I'm going to give you guys a secret. One of my most powerful tools when I'm faced with a tough decision and we're trying to align, again, that nasty little word alignment, in the middle of those discussions, and I see like it's hard to sway one way or another or whatever, I'll just say like, okay, if we do nothing, why would this be good or bad? Like if we do nothing, like we came here, we talked about it, we can't make a decision on this. Obviously, the solution we want to implement hasn't happened yet. So why do it? Like if we do nothing at all and we leave this conversation and it's business as usual, like why is that a bad thing? And sometimes it's not a bad thing. And then going back to that why, like you were saying, understanding the why, then, you might get a hand raised like, well, if we don't do it, then we may be fined, or if we don't do this or this regulatory thing, and then it's like, okay, so now that we've agreed that this has to happen, it kind of helps reset expectations, reset some of those feelings, and then we can find more of that balance between, okay, what's the story or the journey, and or how do we validate that with the data, where's that part of it, and then, okay, we can't leave this conversation without a decision, so we have to make a decision because we already said doing nothing is not the answer. So that's one of my little tips and tricks that I use, that I pull out. Do you have any kind of to kind of help you when you see like you're maybe struggling, maybe you had 2 or 3 meetings on the same topic trying to make this decision? Is there anything that you kind of default to that kind of helps recenter folks?
About that. I'm trying to think, like I need someone to record me in meetings, and I often will just be that really obnoxious product manager who's like, why? Okay, now why? Why is that important? Why? And often that gets us to the problem. And if we know the problem, I'll just come back to like, we are solving this. Come back. We are not solving that. We are solving this. I once had a meeting, a design workshop, where when people would get off into like the not the problem space, over here, they would call tomato. And that was like, come back here, come to the problem. And that was really effective. I think like, yeah, I don't know if I have a certain catchphrase or a thing that really works. All I know is that repetition works. It's rare that,
Yes.
you say that and I bet you people, and you keep saying it, and then finally people will start listening. And yeah, you kind of got to get used to being a bit of a broken record at times. But it works.
Absolutely. I always like to tell people that like, if I don't feel like a gnat on a hot summer day, then I'm not doing my job well. Like I'm constantly just buzzing around. It's like the same thing. You hit that spot and here I come right back. Like, did we nail this? Are we good here? So no, awesome. So, any last thoughts on prioritization or making tough decisions, Steph, that you want to leave the listeners with before we wrap up?
Just do it often, do it all the time. Like there is not, I cannot stress enough, especially when it comes to roadmaps. It is not a one and done exercise. You should be doing it all the time. You should be getting new data. You should be questioning the information and data you have, and then going back through this, bringing in your learnings and insights, because the only thing we ever know is that we do roadmaps and they're wrong. the minute we prepare them, they're wrong. So you got to do it again and hope you get a little closer the next time.
Yes. So if you haven't heard the reoccurring theme, a lot of what you're going to do is going to be wrong. This is why it's another great thing to come join us on the dark side. Like every day you get to be wrong until you're right. And then you can finally go out and have that happy hour.
There's some happy hours along the way, Manny.
What I will say though, while I love working from home, I love having the flexibility of being remote. I would say one of our weapons that we used to use in our toolkit has definitely been stripped away from us as product managers. And that's who's going to turn down food? Like, hey, can I get 5 minutes? Oh, I'm busy. You want to do lunch? Oh, yeah. A lot of things get done over a cup of coffee or lunch. So I have noticed that has been a little tougher in today's landscape. But any things that you do now in this remote space to kind of combat that?
Oh man, it's so hard. It's so hard, especially because so many people are in meetings back to back, and like the lunch thing is hard. And I think what that always brought was like casual conversations and getting to know people. It's not the lunch that helps you. It's the fact that you form relationships with people, and it's so hard to do. I think you just got to be conscious, like people are people have struggles, people have excitement, and like being able to, find out about that and still try and build a relationship, even if it takes away from work. Like it's just so important. I've seen lots of people do different things. And again, some people may not be as outgoing and people oriented as you are, Manny. Like maybe some people never liked going to lunch, but have their own tactics. I think it's, you figure out what works for you, but at your core, like just remember people are people. They're not automatons. They're not resources.
Right.
They've got lives, very fulfilling lives beyond work. If we can.
Absolutely. It is hard to turn me down for lunch though. I'm pretty entertaining.
That's why I'm here, Manny. You sold me with a chicken sandwich.
Yes. So as we wrap up this episode of talking about prioritization and making tough decisions as a product manager, I just want to leave you guys with just understanding that as a product manager, prioritizing products and features and making tough product decisions is a crucial process in the product development space. But by utilizing various strategies such as the customer feedback we talked about, analysis, effort, and getting input from your stakeholder, you can help the organization by making very good, definitive decisions based on all of the data that you've collected to help meet your product needs. So by implementing these effective prioritization strategies we've talked about, it will help you along your journey of making tough product decisions, and the product managers can develop innovative products that meet everyone's needs. Hopefully, we like to say everyone, but at least all the ones that know and love your product. So with that being said, thank you listeners for joining us for another episode of Method and Madness of Product. Until next time. Hope you enjoyed and learned as much as we did from this episode. If you haven't yet, follow us on all of our social media platforms for more awesome and insightful product leadership, discussions, and content. Check out the description for the links. Don't hesitate to message us with any comments, recommendations, or questions. Looking forward to our next discussion. Until next time.